Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Jamie Talks channel. I'm joined by an ex-West Ham legend, a captain in his day, Nigel Reo-Coker. How you doing, mate?
I'm good, mate. Yourself?
I'm very well. It's just a very surreal moment, mate. I've spent many a time watching you play throughout the years, so I'm ecstatic to have you on here. I tell you what, if my dad knew you were on here, I've kept this super quiet. If my dad knew you were on here, mate, he'd be over the moon, mate. So let's just jump straight into it. Obviously, you're at West Ham, but I want to go before you come to West Ham. Whose
Yeah.
boots did you take care of at Wimbledon?
Robbie Earl. Funny
Robbie.
enough, it's a very small world, isn't it? I used to clean Robbie Earl's boots. But for me, I've never lost that like fan moment as a kid. So in my younger days, used to watch Steve McManaman, all these players, and obviously Robbie Earl from when I joined Wimbledon, and even Michael Thomas, obviously a legend who won the league title on the last day with I think was it Liverpool he done it with? Yeah, Liverpool or Arsenal. I see so long ago, man. These old
Yeah.
legends that we're talking about. But then obviously they came there, and I was always still a fan, and I was always wanting to learn off them and stuff. But Robbie Earl, I used to clean his boots, and funny enough, Robbie Earl is doing media work in America, and he's based in California, and
Wow.
his son's just down to Miami, and I still talk to Robbie Earl quite a bit.
That's crazy. Like you always hear stories from back in the day where obviously youth players were taking care of senior players' boots and things like that, and everyone used to look forward to Christmas bonuses. Was Robbie nice on the Christmas bonus?
Robbie was nice. He was generous. He was a nice human being. I tell you what, though, like for my entire career, the first probably one, two, three, four major clubs I played for, it was a family atmosphere. Like it was football was then starting to blossom, but unless you were in it, you wouldn't really know anything about it unless you knew players who were in it. Wimbledon was like a real family atmosphere. I went to West Ham, it was the same thing. Like from the kit people, the groundsmen, everyone was nice to everyone, everyone was polite, and it was a real proper family unit. And it was the same thing at Aston Villa as well. And all those clubs that I played for, it was just such a tremendous family feeling of a club. And now living in America, trying to explain that to American fans, where for them it's more just it's an event than actually a club or something that belongs to the community. And those were the great days of football. And I know before you move on, I want to ask you a question now. You as a fan, do you feel that nowadays you guys are closer to players or you guys are a lot more distant as fans to the players that are playing for your clubs?
Since money's come into the game, like big money, we're definitely further away from the players than what they used to be. Gone are the days where you might see players in the pub after the game and whatnot. Now there is that definitely a disconnect, but it's because these players are mega stars and social media amplifies everything and things like that.
Yeah, I wouldn't say they're megastars. See, the way I look at it is this. I think, like I said, I always felt that we were closer to fans as players in our generation. And there
Yeah,
was a real kind of understanding because we could get close to the fans. We really understood what it meant to the fans. Nowadays, with social media, I think it makes it easier for players to be able to come and defend themselves and say things when stories are printed out. For instance, you look at what's going on with Jadon Sancho and Eric Ten Hag right now. Eric Ten Hag said something, Jadon Sancho instantly came and defended themselves. In our generation, if a manager said something in the papers, that was it. You couldn't come and defend yourself until you got an opportunity to do an interview, maybe a week or two down the line. By
yeah.
that time, it's already embedded in the fans' mindset of what the player is. So players can defend themselves a lot more. But my thing also is this: when players do that on social media, are you really getting the authentic player themselves or these companies that they're paying for that are typing up all these things to make it look like this is the player responding? That's the problem. So really, are you really getting that real connection and authenticness with that player? Or is it that this whole football's changed so much now that you're just getting a representative of a player than the real player themselves? I
Yeah.
think one of the best players who were natural for me when I met him was Declan Rice. And when I trained with under 23s before he made his first team debut, that kid was just genuine him. And then the other player in this generation I say is genuine himself is Jack Grealish. They're
Yeah.
the two players I would say could play in our generation easily and fit in like a glove.
It is a super interesting one. I mean, I'd be interested to hear your take on the Jadon Sancho situation. Uh, when you're publicly digged up by your manager, do you think it's wise to do the response that he's done, or would you keep it quiet?
difficult generation. It's the different generation now. I think for our generation, you'd be very upset, but you have no way to defend yourself unless you can go and do an interview yourself. So it was kind of our generation was more be quiet, get on with it.
Yeah.
But like discussed about the separation between the fans and the players now, these players have a platform to defend themselves because there were times in our situation where stories were printed out that were not true at all, completely fabricated. But for the regular fan who reads the papers, and back in our day, the Sun and the Mirror, that
Yeah.
was the gospel. So they believed everything. So for these players, you can't blame them. I think there's a different way of defending yourselves, and probably you could advise him to do it in a different kind of manner. So now it's going to be a very uncomfortable situation for him because he's gone against the manager. He hasn't got a move, and he's going to be staying at Manchester United and sitting on the bench. And, now the fans are going to be looking at him from a different perspective. And again, it's that disconnect. I feel that more modern players need to be authentically true to themselves and stop worrying about being this brand and being this person. I understand times in the world has changed, but football is your first passion. You play for the club you want to play for. The fans are going to be there, the ups and downs. You got to take everything that comes with it. Just give your authentic self to the fans and the people, because then if you do trip and fall over, people will probably be a bit more compassionate to you because you've always been true to yourself than trying to pretend to be something that you're not.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because I was going to actually ask her later in the interview about kind of a similar scenario where you went through. So in my opinion, I would say that probably the media had more power back in the day because the players didn't necessarily have a platform to voice their concerns. So famously, there was that game where you played against Wigan, right? And the West Ham fans chanted about breaking your leg towards you. I think in retaliation to you reportedly throwing your armband on the ground, but that was like false information, if I'm right?
Which was a lie. Yeah, that's my point. See, that's what I was saying. We had to eat that and get on with it. So just so that whoever's listening understand this, we played a game. I got substituted off. Then there was a report that came out that I threw the armband on the ground. Aidan Mullins came on for me. And then that report kind of blossomed that I disrespected the armband, this and that. I'm not stupid. Yeah, I grew up in South London, but I know what West Ham is about and I know what the club is about. Like I said, spoken to a lot of fans when I first got to the club. And these are real fans. And, for us talking and other people listening, they know exactly who I'm talking about, those type of fans in that section.
Yeah.
So I know what the club is about and I know the responsibilities on my shoulders. Get substituted, yes, of course you're not going to be happy. That was our generation. But I'll never throw an armband on the floor at home at Upton Park. Like I'm not that bright, but I definitely ain't stupid. So I'm not going to do that. So that came on there. There was some reports in the papers, and luckily a friend of mine who worked for Sky at the time got the videotape and put the videotape out there to show me handing the armband to Aidan Mullins. But like I said, by that time, it was already consumed by the Sun readers, the Mirror newspaper and all that. And they took it as the gospel. Right. And then obviously playing against Wigan, my own West Ham fans were singing break his leg, to the point that one of the players that I was playing against was Jason Roberts, a good friend of mine who was at the time the striker at Wigan. And he said, Nigel, like during the game, he said, how do you deal with this? I said, what choice have I got? You just got to get through. You still got a job to do and just be professional. But being a song being sang by your own fans to break your leg over a story that wasn't true. These are the type of situations and scenarios we had to go through. And this wasn't a small minority. This was pretty much nearly half the stadium. And I think at the time it was the Chicken Run stand, the Chicken Hut. Yeah. So in a home game, and then I was still very young at that time, still in my early 20s or maybe 19 or 20 then. So it's those type of scenarios. And I think that's the only thing that for this modern generation, it makes it better for them because they can go out and defend themselves. So that the newspapers are losing the power because now you can't just fabricate stories on players. And remember, these people were writing for papers at the time. They're all West Ham, Liverpool fans. They had their own specific goals that they wanted to do. So if they didn't like you personally, they could destroy your career. The papers back in those days used to make and break players and make and break managers.
Wow. I can't imagine what's that like to go through. At least the players in this generation have now got some sort of mechanism to kind of like voice their concerns on like a mass scale, because ultimately they're followed more. Like, I mean, some of the biggest stars in the game, or even just general Premier League players, they've got probably larger followings than what the news media outlets do now. So it's kind of, it's crazy. It's
Well,
good to hear.
I'll tell you a funny thing, right? So you just said that, right? All right, this is just for me, my example. So those are situations that we had to go through. So even after playing that game with your own fans singing "Break Your Leg," you still had to go and perform again next week and be captain, and you had to leave the stadium. You know what it's like when you used to leave Upton Park, where the fans would be right along the car park and
Yeah.
all sorts of abuse would be shouted at. And again, not picking on him, but look at Gabriel Jesus at Arsenal now. He said one of the reasons he left Manchester City was because, Pep made him cry. And it wasn't that Pep made him cry in any kind of he just didn't play a game. Pep started another player ahead of him, and you cried, and you left Manchester City to go to Arsenal. And this is pretty much the modern day generation of superstar. So imagine if what some of these players now, with the luxury they have in the sense of being so wrapped up in cotton wool, would have had to go through what we went through in our generation. And that's what I'm saying. We always say that we're just cut from a different cloth. And I think that people think, oh, yeah, they're just saying that. That's what everyone says. But no, until you really grow up in that generation and had to be in that dressing room and what it was like as a young player coming through, it's completely different to what these guys go through now. And you look at the generations that we came through, you used to see quite a few captains at a very young age, like 19, 20. You
Yeah.
don't see that no, because a lot of these kids don't come through with that real strong mindset, personality, character, and everything that needs to be a captain at that young age of 19, 20. Like we saw so many in our generation come through because we were cut from a different cloth. Nowadays, these captains are not till they're in their late 20s to 30s.
Because they've had to grow up that kind of experience and kind of sharpen their tool set kind of thing. So as a young kid, obviously you came through at Wimbledon. There was a failed move to Portsmouth, and you ended up signing for West Ham, right? Talk us through that. How did that happen?
I'll give you the quick version of it. Wimbledon was in administration. The guy who took over the club didn't have a clue about footballers or anything like that. He was a numbers guy, very smart guy. So went, and it was funny. It was Harry Redknapp that signed me. So Harry took me there, went there, signed the papers. I'm thinking I'm going to join Portsmouth, Premier League player. Then all of a sudden, get back, and the administrator goes, "No, that's not happening," because someone at the club had told him, "You can't sell Nigel. He's one of our young players. You could sell him for a lot more down the line." So he pulled the plug. Portsmouth were going to go and try and take them to court because obviously I legally signed the contract and they agreed, but somehow nothing much came of it, and I ended up staying there. And then that was the time when West Ham obviously got relegated to the Championship. Then Wimbledon trained to MK Dons, and we played at Milton Keynes Dons, and we played against West Ham and everything. And that was it, really. Just blossomed from that game. I played against them. Pardew took over, wanted to buy me, and I actually nearly joined Everton as well before that.
Ah,
And then obviously went to West Ham.
would that have been David Moyes at the time?
David Moyes at the time at Everton, it was myself, and I think after my thing didn't go through, they ended up taking Tim Cahill
Wow, wow,
at the time. Yeah,
which proved to be a huge signing for them. Obviously, when you came into West Ham, it was a dressing room full of characters. You got people like Teddy Sheringham, Sean Newton, Yossi Benayoun, Bobby
yeah.
Zamora, Marlon Harewood, just to name a few. What is the craziest story you have from your playing days in that dressing room?
There's too many stories. There's way too many. It literally. How would I describe the dressing room? Right, big characters, big personality is probably the main thing, but the truth is, it literally was like a band of brotherhoods. Like we didn't always get along with each other, but we did fight for each other on the football pitch. There was a real understanding. There was a competitiveness at training, nearly many fights at training. And you just wonder how we managed to perform together on the pitch on a Saturday.
Yeah,
And it literally, I don't know the best way to describe it, because you can't really describe that dressing room because those dressing rooms just don't exist no more.
yeah.
But we socialized together. I would say throughout the week, we'll probably have been on Faces on a Sunday. Where was Monday? I can't remember where Monday was. Tuesday will probably be China Whites. Wednesday would have been somewhere else. And then Thursday would have been somewhere else. And then Friday's the rest day, and then perform on Saturday. That's
Wow.
how our general week was. And it was pretty much 90% of the team would have been out. But pretty much 99% of the team would have been at Faces on a Sunday. Probably apart from Yossi. But you can't describe it because the bond that we had off the field and the stories and all that is absolutely crazy.
What?
Obviously some of the stories I don't want to say.
Yeah, I get you, man. I get you. It's not safe for
It
work.
was
I appreciate it.
the only thing that I was not involved in. I would say there was a very serious card school at the back of the bus. Let's just say there was a very, very serious card school at the back of the bus. A lot of brown paper bag money would be coming in.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah, that's probably much I would say. That card school got very serious, and some players were left crying.
that's mad. That's mad. What was your initiation when you joined?
Do you know what? There wasn't really any initiation. Remember, I was coming as a captain from Wimbledon at the time, MK Dons. So you had the old school G's, I call them, Stevie Lomas, Don Hutchinson, and a few of the others. So I came in, and I think I kind of rubbed them up the wrong way because I was very confident in myself and I was a strong character. But there's
Mm.
a few things that they kind of didn't like about me when I came in. But again, in our generation, you had to stand firm. It's the test of time. So he's going into the Lions then, and you had to be a bit of a lion yourself. So there was no real initiation. I think it was more about how you carry yourself. And my thing is, I always treat people how I like to be treated, and I was very competitive, and that was it. It wasn't ever arrogance. And I know people always get this confused because I think my thing is this: if you don't believe in yourself, how do you expect someone else to believe in you? The belief comes from within yourself first before anything else, because your parents, your family, your loved ones can believe in you all they want to believe in you. But if it doesn't come from yourself, that self-confidence, you're never going to be able to progress and do anything. There's only so much they can do from a distance. There's only so much love and confidence they can send to you, but it has to come from within. And that's how it was for me. And then sometimes, obviously, some people might mistake that, oh, he's arrogant, he's this and that, but he was never arrogant. It was always just that self-belief. And like I said, in our generation, you had to be strong. You really had to be strong or you'd be eating away.
Well, when I think Nigel Reo-Coker, I think West Ham captain. Was it the self belief that you had in yourself that made you a West Ham captain at such a young age?
Yeah, it was self-belief and it was also learning from it. But I've been captain from a very young age. I remember when I actually got a professional club at Wimbledon, I was captain from 14 years old. And I
Wow.
literally just captained every single Wimbledon team all the way through, reserves. And I captained Wimbledon's first team at, I think, 19. 19, I was captain at Wimbledon's first team. And you had the likes of David Connolly, Neil Shipley,
Yeah.
still playing, Damien Francis, like some real senior players, but I was still captain at 19, even Joby McAnuff. So being a leader was something that people always used to say to me from school and growing up in life that like you're a natural born leader, whether you like it or not, that's you. And then even taking into the captaincy of captaining West Ham, and I really had a great relationship with Peter Grant at the time, Alan Pardew's first team coach. And he always said, you just got to be true to yourself. He said, if you come in and you're not shouting and bossing people around and telling them what to do, then you're not being true to yourself. You're not being true to who you are. So it was kind of something you learn to kind of grow and take on board and learn the responsibilities that come with it.
Well, when you was at West Ham, obviously, and whilst you at your time at the club, you went to two consecutive playoff finals, not playing in the first one. Losing that first year, did that fuel you and the rest of the team in the second year?
Being very honest with you, honestly, I was pissed that I didn't play that first game. But in my eyes, I kind of looked at Pards from the side eye, like, yeah, that's why you should have played us. Like, because even we had friends at Crystal Palace, and they were expecting us to play. Pards didn't start. I think it was myself, and I think it was maybe Hayden was on the bench as well. He didn't start myself and Hayden, and then the Palace boys were actually just laughing. And funny enough, there was something I actually came close to joining Palace, and even Simon Jordan was making jokes about it with some of my mates. I think Mikel Lejertwood was there at Crystal Palace and someone else. So I was pissed for me at the end of the day because you want to play every game. It's a
Yeah.
massive game. And then it's kind of like, well, it's not our decision. Pars made that decision. And then we just kind of like, yeah, well, that teaches you for not playing us. So then obviously the next year, the thing about West Ham is, you know, the responsibility that comes with it. And again, it goes back to the conversation of how close we were to the fans. Like, we knew next year we couldn't fail. We knew we had to get back to the Premier League. So I came in that year halfway through the season. And then obviously this year, it gives us a whole season in the Championship. So we really kind of grew as a team. We knew what the expectancy was from the fans and the fan base. And that was, remember, being at Upton Park. So for us, it was just, we all wanted to get to the Premier League. That was the desire and the goal. And even though we still lived our lives in the faces and all the nightclubs throughout every week, we still managed to do that.
Yeah.
But again, it went to the last like 10 or 11 games of the season. Like we had to win like 10 out of 11 or 9 out of 11 or something like that. And we just went on an absolute crazy run of wins and kept the momentum. And then having the experience of the year before, I think, was our advantage. And then this time we did start the game and we won promotion. But I just think that, again, it's the community. It's understanding what it means to wear that shirt and play for that club. That's what we had compared to most modern day clubs and footballers now, unless those clubs are really embedded in the community. But for a club like West Ham, especially how big West Ham is, we really had that. So we already knew the pressure that was on us as players.
Yeah, I get that. I get that. I mean, as a fan, and speaking of finals, it would be impossible to not talk about the 05-06 final. I think that's probably the first time I cried over football. I still have nightmares over that Gerrard's goal. Is that the best goal you've seen live?
When I kind of tried to jump in front of it to
Yeah.
block him, and then I turn around and I just see the ball swerve out the post and go back in, and then I'm just looking at the clock and it's like 90. So I'm like, oh my God. Like, I mean, listen, I know people won't appreciate this, but it's just a simple thing as this. I always say this, and even to young kids, I give them advice of, as long as you can look at yourself in the mirror knowing you gave absolute everything, that's all that matters. Forget what everyone else is saying. As long as you can do that, that's all that really counts in the end of the day, that you can sleep well at night. Because if you don't give everything and you always say to yourself, I wish I could have done more, I wish I could have done that, that's when it's going to keep eating you inside. Any neutral who watched that FA Cup final will probably say it's still to this day one of the greatest FA Cup finals, because even as a neutral, it was a great game. And every West Ham fan I've spoken to have always said, you know what, you can't ask any more from the players. You know, we gave it our absolute all. We were inches away from it, from a strike that he probably will never ever be able to do that again. You know, as a player, you could do that 100 times and it wouldn't go in, but it just was an unbelievable occasion. But we gave it the best we could. And that's all that really mattered. I think every neutral, every West Ham fan appreciated the effort. It does eat still whenever you
Yeah.
watch that back and you watch the goal. It will never stop eating away because of how close we came. But overall, I think most West Ham fans would have been saying it was a tremendous occasion, and no one really gave us a chance
No,
against that Liverpool side to take it to penalties, and that no one gave us a chance. And penalty, extra time, and penalties. I think we did the club proud and the crest proud that day.
for sure. I mean, the three things that stick in my mind over everything from that game is obviously the Gerrard goal, the Marlon Harewood miss, and then the Scaloni clearance where he puts it on a plate for Gerrard.
But also, let's not forget also that the fingertip save
Yeah.
by what's the goalkeeper's name? I think
Reina?
what's the bald-headed one
Yeah, Reina.
for Reina, yeah. And then that was from a Marlon's header as well. And literally, it was just a fingertip that took that from going into the top corner.
Yeah, it was a tough day. As I said, it was the first time that football made me cry, and ever since then, it's been a roller coaster. But you know, Prague last year made up for it anyway. Taking it back to West Ham as well. Talk me through Tevez and Mascherano. Tevez scored the big goal at Old Trafford that ended up keeping us in the Premier League. Did you think we had a player on our hands when they both arrived at training?
We had no idea, if I'm honest. I remember Alan Pardew mentioning it to me because at the time I was captain, we've got these two young Argentinians. I had no idea about them, no history. Because again, that was for us when we were young. So we only really knew the Premier League, and the Premier League was tunnel vision for all of us. You know, you only wanted to play there and be there, not interested in going anywhere else. So they came in, saw them in training. I think for me, instantly, I knew that Mascherano could not play in a 4-4-2, which is how we like to play 4-4-2, wingers out wide. and you go against your man, you do your job and drop and cover at times. Mascherano didn't have the legs. Tevez, you could see had a bit about him. Like he had an eye for a goal, worked hard up top, and really could get some goals, and it was a different catalyst and something new and fresh for us. Then they had the period of Mascherano not playing, and you could see he was upset, but we couldn't fit him in our system because we'd have to change the whole formation. And then if you look at when he went to Liverpool, he played in a three. So he
Yeah.
just did the sweeping job sitting around. They had the two in front of him because he didn't have the legs to play in a 4-4-2 for full 90 minutes, especially in our generation, how football was. Our football was more high tempo pace in the sense of back and forth than it is nowadays, where it's controlled and accelerated in only certain moments where teams have time to pass and move that ball around. Mascherano was just different, and Tevez the two different characters. In all honesty, Tevez was just he probably the best way to describe him was a rock and roll lifestyle type of guy. Because I remember when he first came in, he said he wanted to retire from football at 28 because he was playing in a rock band and stuff like that. Mascherano was a different kind of character and a different animal, but you did know you had something special. How special all the way to what they became, didn't really see that. But for them, they were absolutely sensational and unique in who they were. And I know people always give a lot of credit to obviously Tevez scoring that goal, but one person deserves always a mention. I always mention him for me is Bobby Zamora.
Yeah.
People need to watch those games back again and see how much effort, running, and like real spirit Bobby Zamora showed. Because without Bobby Zamora doing all that running and effort and really putting himself about for us, I personally don't think would have been able to do that great escape. And he doesn't get a lot of credit because all it goes to the goal scorer of Tevez, but Bobby Zamora played a massive part in that.
Oh, Bobby Zamora is an absolute legend. I mean, playoff final scores the goal. I remember the first time that Arsenal ever lost at the Emirates in there when they'd moved was a Bobby Zamora goal. I think Arsenal had like 30 odd shots on goal. We were played off the park for 90 minutes and we walked away 1-0 winners. Like Bobby Zamora is a legend, absolute legend. And you hear about him being like a good chap off the pitch as well. Never met him. I'd love to, but
Oh, you
yeah,
love him, but Bobby's one of the guys. Bobby's one of the guys. He's like a fan, just genuine human being. Not so much into that whole footballer category, as you say. He really is a great human being.
that's great. Well, let's talk towards the end of your career at West Ham. Then, obviously, you left us for Villa. We were going through a rocky period at the time of our owners. That was obviously a crazy period with the Norwegian takeover. What were your motivations to leave at the time?
Just be simple. I wasn't wanted at the club. I wasn't wanted at the club. I wanted to stay there. There are many things that happen behind closed doors that people don't know about. Like this whole thing of, oh, I wanted to leave to go to Manchester United. That incident didn't happen like that. When a manager says to you that, listen, there's interest from other clubs for you, I personally don't want you to go. I'm going to let you go unless it's a top four club. I said, fine. He said, you're the captain here. You don't need to go anywhere else. We're going to be a big club. We've got big ambitions and plans. I said, that's perfectly fine with me. I've got no issues with that. I'm happy to be here. I'd love to be here long term. I'm captain here. What more could I want? It's a massive club. I know how big West Ham is. And then they say, oh, top four club comes in. And then the top four club came in. And then the manager turns around and goes, nah, he's not going. I didn't even have a conversation with him. So, but I knew this went on. So I didn't have a conversation with him. I didn't go to his door and kick it down to say, I don't want to be here no more and this and that. None of that happened. But obviously people who knew the club, people working those things, got a whiff of what happened. So it did actually occur. But I didn't say anything. And then obviously the next season started and we didn't start well because of, again, different things and different scenarios. I didn't have a pre-season. I had to have a epidural in my back, which was one of the reasons why I left the England camp at the time under Swengo and Ericsson. So I didn't have a pre-season, went straight into the season. We didn't start well, loads of things going on. And then that's when the story came out,
Yeah,
which without people knowing the full strength. Then obviously come to the end of the season, didn't have a fantastic relationship with Gerbs, really and truly. It was kind of, he's the manager, I'm the captain, that's it. There wasn't really a relationship there. So then at the end of the season, they're already kind of saying, we want you to go. They weren't trying to offer me a contract to stay. And they basically wanted to get rid of me. So for me, it's like, okay, I'm not going to stay where I'm not wanted. And that's how I ended up leaving West Ham. It wasn't ever me forcing the move or anything along those lines. It was the fact of, oh, we're going to go a different direction, and we want to get these players in and all these different things. And they forced me out the door. And there'll be other players that you could see. If you look at when I left, think what James Collins left after, think Anton, like pretty much most of the team that got promoted left after I left, which goes to show that the club had other ideas, the owners had other ideas. They wanted to get these new players in and get rid of the old kind of guard and stuff like that, and build a whole new project.
Well, I think as West Ham fans now, I mean, probably at the time, no one really understood what was going on. But I think West Ham fans now can probably look back and understand that, what was it, Egert Magnuson, who took us over the club. It was one of the craziest periods of West Ham history that there's been. So yeah, it's a shame how it ended, but it was like enjoyable while you were there, and you were certainly probably the first West Ham captain that I remember from watching football. So as I said, mate, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on today and talking and going through the memory archives. It's been an absolute pleasure for myself. Thank you so much for joining me today, Nigel. I appreciate it.
Hey, listen, this is just the start, mate. We can go back and do some other stuff. If people want to find that information, they reach out to you. We can go back and even do more interviews if you want, mate. No problem at all. And even talk about the current West Ham squad right now and situation now. But I mean, listen, honestly, for me, my first passion's always just been playing football, and it was just a dream come true, whether people want to believe it or not. But when you dream and, you grow up in South London, you're playing football in the streets with a tennis ball and all that. You used to watch Premier League and used to watch the likes of like a Teddy Sheringham, Paul Ince and all those guys, and you played against them. And then you play for one of the biggest clubs in London. And I still feel, for me, West Ham are not really scratching their full potential on the worldwide market. Because I think if they really let people know and understand what it is to be a West Ham fan, what the club means to the community and the people, there'll be a lot of fans who actually join around the world because of their sense of identity, how they identify themselves as, fans and people and human beings. If they let them understand that, I think West Ham has so much potential to grow. Living in America, West Ham is the equivalent of being like a Pittsburgh Steelers fan or a Green Bay Packers fan. Working class, and it's about the club, the community, and what it is, and they take that all around the world. I think there's so much potential still for the club, and that's just me being there, and that's me speaking of my experiences of interacting with fans, talking to these people, and knowing what it is, and coming across West Ham fans still day to day. It really is a terrific club.
I totally agree with you, mate, and I think West Ham are, in some ways, they're a sleeping giant. I feel like they have fans, whereas I feel like other clubs have supporters, and I feel like that's a real key difference between West Ham and other teams in London. I mean, as much as they've lost a piece of their identity from leaving Upton Park and going to the London Stadium, it still very much has that community feel around it. It still feels like a community club. Everyone at West Ham is of a very, very, very similar demographic. They're all from a very similar place in London or Essex, where I'm from. Everyone comes from the same part of the world. So I think, we could, if we was to get taken over, I think that we could be a force to be reckoned with, because, we already averaged the third highest attendance in the Premier League already, but below what Man United and Arsenal. So
it's funny though, because people always ask me what it's like for West Ham and West Ham fans. I said, listen, if you grow up in a West Ham household, you're a West Ham fan. You're not going to be supporting any other team, because it goes from generation to generation, and then you embody and you love it. This ain't like other clubs where one person's a Chelsea fan, the other person's a Tottenham fan. I said, it doesn't happen like that in a West Ham household. That's what it means about the club and the community. A friend of mine who I actually hang out with in the cigar lounge, he told me he went on a trip to London the other day, and he actually went to a West Ham game. And obviously he knows me from my history and my career, from meeting me in a cigar lounge. He said, listen, I've become a West Ham fan. He said, I love them. He said, they're crazy. Because he experienced it. I can't remember what game he went to last season, but he said he absolutely loved it. And now he follows West Ham. He's a West Ham fan, and said he's going to go back to the games and stuff like that. And everything on his phone and social media is all about West Ham. I said, that's the experience that if West Ham could actually advertise it and let people be able to explain outside of England what it is, people would actually go over there and experience it and would be absolutely just gobsmacked and just become instant West Ham fans because of just understanding the sense of community.
Yeah, we saw that in Prague. I think we had like 5,000-6,000 fans allowed to go there, but we had 30,000 fans just in a fan park just outside the stadium. So it's like that says everything about the club in terms of where we are, in terms of the amount of support and fandom that are, just following the club. And I'm singing, we're singing from the same hymn sheet in that regard as to, I love West Ham in my heart, but I don't love West Ham because we don't win trophies every year. I love West Ham because I'm just in love with everything around it, the culture, the community, where it comes from, the kind of attitude that's like it comes with playing for West Ham. Like, we've all got this cheek, like we're just known for being quite cheeky, and I just love that. I love that about West Ham fans. And when you think West Ham, you think that loud bunch from East London. And if we were to get taken over, I think we'd only get louder. But that's a topic for another day, and I'd love to do a part 2, mate. So now that you've offered me that, I'm
Mate,
taking you up on it. I'm taking you
anytime, mate. Anytime.
Class, mate. Well, where can everyone find you on socials? And I'll
socials, mate. No socials. They can message you. I'm not massive on it, mate. I'm not massive on that.
That's class. No problem, mate. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, mate. And yeah, I'll catch you next time, everyone.